Web 2 versus Web 3. Is there need for a full transition?
Hey everyone, hi. Welcome to this panel. So let me introduce first. Our panelist is Joshua from University of Malta, expert of blockchain. I heard so much good things about you last night. And Tony from Rate Group, investment advisory group. So thank you for joining the panel. My name is Yun from BeInCrypto, Web3 media powerhouse, global, representing 13 different languages and domains. So let's start the panel discussion on the pain point of Web 2 going into Web 3 among different portfolios of company. So before we go into the detail, can you give me a definition? What do you think is a full transition for companies into Web 3? How do you define it?
So I don't think there is ever going to be a full transition to Web 3. And the reason is, even if we look at Web 2 and Web 1 and the different technologies, Web 2 is a technology that is built on all the traditional Web 1 technologies. Web 3 is just building on, so not just building on, but we're using traditional Web 2 technologies inside of this new paradigm of decentralization, which is what Web 3 brings. And the real challenge is how to come up with services that end users can actually use, yet have some form of decentralization. Because if you think about fully decentralized systems, it's not usable to the masses. Masses don't know how to install MetaMask, how to use smart contracts directly. So the trick is really not complete transitioning, but figuring out where to transition, where to have decentralization, and where to keep centralization, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you. My whole philosophy is it's all about threesomes, okay? Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 need to merge together. Same as the physical, digital, and AI. This all three needs to come together. Everybody that says we're going to move on to Web 3, it's like we've already built on Web 2 and Web 1, exactly as you said. Yeah? So trying to move everything over, it's a great fantasy, but it's impossible because we as human beings, we're still in Web 1. Some of us are in Web 2, but we're way, way so far ahead of being Web 3. It's all about the individuals, and that's the path. I totally agree with you. There has to be a merger, but you can never transition all the way over.
And what do you think the pros and cons for company transition into Web 3? Because it becomes a huge hidden trend. At some point, it's not just about the product, about the economic, about the user possibility. It's about just getting into Web 3. What is the pros and cons about, for Web 2 company goes into Web 3, in your opinion?
So when it comes to companies that have monopolies over the particular sector that they have, I think their initial reaction is there's cons. And to be quite honest, as a centralized entity, it does seem like a con. You're losing control of your processes. You're potentially losing profitability on certain services. As regards to pros for the companies, they can definitely bring more transparency to their products. They can even create systems where it's impossible for someone to say that they cheated because the logic is decentralized, the code is automated, and certain aspects of the code can be cheated against. So I would say for centralized companies, pros are more transparency, where fingers can't even be pointed at them that they did cheat. The big trade-off is how much do they decentralize themselves out of the picture? I mean, that's a tough pill for a heavily profitable centralized company to take.
Do you think if there's even a need for that? Because that's another topic that we discuss quite a bit.
It depends. It depends on the use case. I think there are certain centralized service providers that are doing a great job, and we don't question some of these service providers, so why should we bother decentralizing them? Let's focus on decentralizing those services that do warrant decentralization.
What do you think, Tom?
I think it's like any kind of new technology. It's either to increase sales, reduce cost, and make things easier. It's the same thing with anything that gets introduced. We have to look at it from this perspective. If you're an entrepreneur, the Web3 gives you the opportunity of going after a new marketplace with less cost and the ability to go globally. If you're a medium-sized company, it gives you the ability to look at, okay, how can I expand much quicker, but also grow internationally? Web3, if you're looking at a big corporation, it's one of those things where you have to. Sorry. That's the first time anybody's told me I'm quiet, so it's usually the opposite. So the other part is, if you're a large corporation, you have to look at it, okay, on how does this benefit me and what do I give up? The great example is Adidas, okay? Adidas jumped on the Web3 of the NFTs, it bought the ape, and it made about 10 times as much just off the advertising. You have to look at it from that perspective. So it's either you embrace it inside your corporation, or you embrace it as an advertising or as sales. And this is the interesting part. People don't like giving up control if you have it. Okay. Also, people that has control, they don't usually have it. So you have to have the mixture of it, depending on where you are in the cycle.
Indeed, I think what I would add as well, I just not now thought about it, is I was sort of giving the impression that it's totally up to the company to decide on decentralizing. However, as a people, if we want to use decentralized services, it may not be up to the company. They may need to decentralize certain parts to stay relevant as well. So I think it's also keeping a finger on your market, on your users, to figure out, are they moving towards decentralization? If so, you might need to react, because you might be left behind if you don't.
And we mentioned, Tony mentioned corporation and you mentioned users. So let's just go into another question. What is the difference you see for a Web2 company like Adidas, LV, transition into Web3? What's the differences you see on them, the main differences? Is it predominantly on the corporate side, the company side, or the user side? Can you give some examples of,
What do you mean?
So what changed after they go into the Web3 space? And if there is anything changed, in what aspect?
The biggest
corporation.
The biggest thing from a consumer is they've got nobody to blame anymore. Okay, that's one of the big things. People want people to blame about mistakes. They want to complain or vent. Being in the Web3, there's no entity anymore. You can either put it online, but that is it. The accountability, the safety net that everybody has grown up with goes away. And people are scared of that. They love the benefits of Web3, but the full understanding of there's nobody to blame, there's no accountability, that's the part most people don't realize just yet. When we're in an upward trend, it's all milk and honey. But when the market crashes, they always look and go, who am I supposed to blame? But the thing is, most people don't realize it's you, buddy. Yeah? So it's from a corporation point of view, it's about integrating it slowly, like one did with the internet. How does this, can I embrace it to give interaction? Can I embrace it for sales? Can I do it from a legal perspective? It's all about adding it to make things easier. Where do I have problems? Can Web3 help it? It's all about integrating it, not putting it all part of your business model. Because if you have a winning strategy and your business is making money, you don't want to change it. You just want to make it better. You don't change something that's winning. That's from my perspective.
And I think, the responsibility, it's such an important issue that typically users think decentralization is great because now I have self-sovereign ownership of my assets. No one can take them away from me. No one can also return them if you lose them, or if you use a smart contract that's buggy. And very often, it's only after someone goes through these experiences, loses their assets, or uses a smart contract that does something it wasn't supposed to do, that then go against their ethos of code is law. So in this space, there's this controversy of we should trust the code. Whatever the code does, that is law. Even if it's buggy, that is law. As soon as someone loses their assets, I think they then take a step back and say, I'll go to the legal system to try to get my assets back.
That's the thing you say about the code. Andy always says it's unhackable or this and that. So that's a crowd of rubbish. Yeah? What humans have made, humans can break. Okay, until a point that AI makes it, there's still a human aspect to it. So everything can be broken in this world, even Bitcoin. If you own 51% of the block, you can control the whole thing. Okay, you've seen it before in regard to transaction Ethereum, where they reversed some transactions. The thing is, until 51% of it is controlled by anybody, they can still control everything. So we have to look at that aspect.
I mean, even if you get 51%, you could undertake an attack. But if you think through it a bit in regards to what the operators would do, what the users would do, it would still survive because let's say someone undertakes this type of attack. What would happen is the value of that particular blockchain network would go down to zero, and people would just keep using the unattacked network. So I think the great thing about decentralization is that we now do have systems that will do exactly what they're written to do. Like even smart contracts, you cannot go against the code of a smart contract. The problem is it's humans that created it, and there might be a bug in that smart contract. And we can use static verification, all types of computer science techniques to come to the assurance that our code is fit for purpose, but we can only get higher levels of assurance towards 99.999% recurring, and we can never have a 100% guarantee that our code is fit for purpose. And that's the worrying part, and I think that's where the traditional centralized world can help fix the problems of decentralized code.
And when you're advising clients, obviously, when asking, educating students, what is the main difficulties for Web2 company face when they enter into the space? Because some of them that are, really excited. Yeah.
You deal with students, right?
What I would say is the most important thing is to move away from extremes of decentralization and centralization. Find the right balance. Find the points that should be decentralized. Find the points that need to be centralized. There are certain services that are impossible to be decentralized. For example, let's say driving our cars, getting a road license. Do we really want popularity or a community to decide who can drive and who cannot? Certain services need to be centralized. And that is the hardest thing, figuring out where on the spectrum of decentralization certain services and parts of the services should live. So there's no silver bullet.
So I'll add my part. So my business is investments. I advise individuals and companies, but I also have another part of my business, which is I buy failed projects. My company buys failed Web3 projects, and we turn them around or we give them new life. And we literally look at it from the problem's point of view. Usually the reason why it's usually failed is they go to so much extreme. They try and believe that the Web3 is going to change everything. It's usually not. The ones that have succeeded is the ones that have actually integrated into Web2 and understand they have to move forward as it is at the moment. The thing is, people get, in regards to Web3, about the community deciding, as you said, okay? We humans are very, very easily persuaded, okay? One of the easiest example I'll ask anybody is water. Is water good for you or is water bad for you? The water that gives us life, okay, it's the same product can also kill us, okay? So the thing is, if you ask a majority of the people, we've been educated that water is good for you. If I put your head in the water for 5 minutes, you don't think it's good for you. So the thing is, we have to understand that emotions in regards to a decentralized system, it can change everything so much. It's usually the hard choices that Web2 companies make ensures their success. It's not usually the popular choice that gets things done. It's usually the hard choices that needs to get done, but not what people want. People want results. They don't want the negative behind it. Yeah. An example is people say, "Give me the baby." They don't want the 9 months to carry the baby, and that's the situation we're in with a lot of Web3 companies, in my opinion.
Very interesting. So obviously, from a financial point of view of Tony and an intellectual point from Joshua, how would you advise company who still believe in the technology, who still believe in the industry and the community behind it? How would you advise them when they would like to enter into the space to basically have less roadblocks and be more clear with like what they're looking at?
The roadblocks will always be there because it's part of society. Okay, number one. In regards to if you're entering this, you have to find a solution. It's either you are providing a solution to make another product or service better, okay, or you create something crazy, okay. We have products we've invested in like AI girlfriends, okay, and the reason behind it was we saw in Asia there's a huge demand for it, and so the thing is, supply, demand, that's what drives everything from nature to everything. So don't make it complicated. stick to the economics and then build on top of it.
Yeah, I think like the ideology being tied to ideologies when it comes to profitability and survivability, that can destroy you. And I think that's important to not be tied to the ideology and be focused on how are we going to survive? How are we going to be marketable? I mean, in the past bull runs that we saw or the ICO hypes, there were so many mistakes that were made just because people were tied to ideologies. People also didn't factor in certain intricacies of how the market works. They were given a lot of ether, and ether had a particular value of, I don't know, whatever it was back then, a few $100s. As soon as the value drops, suddenly they have half their value to survive on achieving the same business plan that they promised to achieve. So I would say there's a few like very specific lessons of those types that I would tell them to think about. But the most important one is, just like Tony said, move away from the ideology and think about the profitability, the marketability, the survivability.
I add one thing when I say invest or I advise companies or individuals. Remember, there's three realities. The way you view it, the way the other person views it, and the truth. So always have that ideology. Nobody has the right answer. Except for women, of course. I'm not saying that, of course. It's just like, or Google. It's just like, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, it's all about, you have to take these kinds of viewpoints to actually understand and grow. If you keep to your viewpoint, you'll always lose out.
Then on that point, I would say bring in the devil's advocate, someone who's totally against your technology, and try to convince them that it's actually going to be useful.
Exactly. You create a Chinese wall, we do the same thing. We ask different people, and especially people that hate stuff, to see what the problems are. After that, you fix it, you move forward, you keep on doing it. It's like how steel is made. Steel is not natural. It's done because it's battered. Yeah, it's the same thing. A business is growing because it's been battered, and it keeps on evolving. Or they give up and complain and say, I used to do this. There's two different ideologies.
So I'm going to make a couple of points after that. So obviously coming from a media side and where we gather many community users and end users. So what we can see when we help some of our Web3 project launch into market is even though they are already in the Web3 space, but the notion and the approach of how you onboard your clients and convert your clients are very different compared to traditional marketing. So I think company have to also understand the mindset. So before it's corporate focused, now it's user focused. So like Tony say, having different aspects and be very alert into what do you want, is your user want, how do you integrate what you want by giving your community what they want. So that becomes a new form of way of thinking. So that it's not just, hey, we are in monopoly, that's what we want, let's just take what we give you.
But also, I've had this so many times. I've been in this industry for 8 years. I got no idea about technology. Seriously, no bloody idea. But I understand finance. And whenever I ask people, it's always the same. What do you do? And they'll give me all these nice words about decentralization, blah, 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 blah. I say, seriously, what do you do? I'm a 4-year-old child. Tell me what you do. And once they can't answer me at that level, I'll contact you in 6 months when I want to take you over when you failed. Because if you can't explain to me very simply, that means you don't know it, product, and you're trying to make things confusing or jump on a bandwagon. I always believe in that thing. Keep it simple, stupid. But people like to make it all sexy and Instagrammable, so as I call it.
Thank you very much, guys. I think our panel is finished. Thank you, everyone, for joining our panel. And our next panel is about Web3 marketing strategy. So, you're interesting. Yes, thank you.